Hi, this is Misha, and moving on with our look at Klingon ships, a closer look, and specifically our look at the battle cruiser as it's evolved. We kind of began with the D5, then the D7, then the Katinga, and now it's time to move into the next generation era in the 24th century with the Vor'cha. This definitely falls into the battle cruiser category, but it's also referred to as an attack cruiser, and kind of used as such, kind of a fast, heavy strike ship, especially as we get into the Dominion War period. As I said in a previous video, the first couple of seasons of Next Generation, they didn't have their own Klingon ship. They had to kind of make do with the Bird of Prey and the Katinga. But in Season 3, the Klingon Chancellor, Kimpek or Impek, something like that, the old man that was dying and coughed a lot, and yeah. Get a new spiffy flagship. So we can say, because it was kind of acknowledged in that episode, this was a pretty new, advanced ship for the Klingons, that this went into service approximately around 2365. We also really get a pretty good sense of its length. We're at about 481 meters, so quite significantly larger than the Katinga. As much as double the length, but still quite a bit shorter than the Enterprise D in that episode. And of course we have less mass, whereas the Enterprise has a very, wide profile. Much like Riker in the later seasons, and when he guest starred in Enterprise. The Enterprise D did as well. This, of course, is very clearly still being inspired by older Klingon ships. We have kind of the wing areas. We've got this raised portion in the back, kind of their engineering hull. Engines are in the back. We've got kind of wide and flattened warp engines, nacelles. Kind of have these cooling areas here, which are a little reminiscent of a Bird of Prey, honestly. But then we have the neck is definitely beefed up, not just a sharp taper. And then we have kind of this module here, and then we have the forward section, kind of forked. This has disruptors, 2 large located here and several elsewhere, as well as photons. What's funny is, even though this is a Klingon ship, very aggressive, because in the Next Generation they're at peace, we really don't see these in action. They're just kind of there in the shots. And if we see Klingon ships firing and, jaunting about, they usually tend to be birds of prey. Keep in mind, this is still the time of real models, not CGI, so they were a bit limited in what they can do, and explains why the Next Generation battles are a little, very, very old-fashioned naval, just kind of standing there pounding each other. We don't really know a crew. We really only see on board one of these once or twice, briefly. Pretty generic Klingon interiors. We can assume they've got them crammed in here pretty good, though, based on what we know about the Katinga and D7. It seems to be a much faster ship, at least capable of warp 9, quite maneuverable and agile. As I've said before, we don't really know much about it. In fact, really lack of information, and really even kind of lack of being seen on screen is what identifies the Vor'cha. They went to all this trouble to have themselves a new ship, and they really didn't utilize it much in Next Generation or Deep Space Nine. They refer to Vor'chas, but by Deep Space Nine they're already just kind of relegated to a secondary role, with the Negh'var being their primary flagship. I guess this maybe just came in at an awkward time, and for whatever reason, the powers that be really just had a thing for the bird of prey. Sometimes I could understand where a bird of prey would have been a better choice, but there were times when I think a full-fledged ship like the Vor'cha would have been more appropriate, but the script, or at least the direction, called for yet the bird of prey again. I'm sure some of it was just using stock footage, though. I just kind of feel like this is underutilized, and because of that we don't get overexposed to it, so it was kind of a treat to see it. It's not my favorite design of all time, but it's a very sturdy, solid, serviceable design, distinctly Klingon, yet modernized. Aggressive without being crazy so. Yeah, just a good Klingon ship to have. But we just don't know much about these. We definitely know that many were used and served during the Demian War and afterwards. Since these weren't introduced until the latter half of the 24th century, we can safely estimate that they were in service for many decades to come, at least in some capacity. In fact, through an episode of Enterprise, we could actually maybe even argue these were in service into the 25th or even 26th centuries. But that's kind of an alternative timeline, and well, it's Enterprise, so I actually like Enterprise, as I've said, but sometimes the visuals, again, like where the Katinga popped in instead of a new ship, are a little, take it with a grain of salt. You know, this is a pretty wide, but it's still a very thin design. I can't imagine it has just a ton of decks. I wish we had more data on it. You know, confirmed, canon, not just speculative. I don't have a problem with speculative data. I mean, it's all fiction, so good grief. Something can't be more fictitious than something else if it's all fiction. But still, it's always nice when it's seen on screen, and we just don't see this on screen much. And when we do, it's just kind of an external shot of it just hovering there off the Enterprise's bow. Oh well, sometimes less is more, and I think that's the case with the Vor'cha. As far as this Eaglemoss model, many people have commented how well they did, and I would agree. It has a good substantial feel. The main body is metal, with of course the engines and part of the front here being the polymer. They released this relatively early on. It was in the first 24 ships, so it came out in the first year, but it wasn't one of the earliest ships. I was happy to get this, but I wasn't super excited. What really makes me excited about new Eaglemoss ships are when I've never felt a model of it before. And of course I had felt Vor'chas. There were various models, there were the Micro Machines, there was even the old Playmates toy, which was actually pretty neatly done for a plastic piece of thing. But of course there were much higher detail models available from the late 80s onwards. So I knew what this looked like, but of course I had to get it because it just, you gotta do it. I'm a completionist. I know that's shocking. Amazing, huh? No, it's a good model, and it definitely, I mean, it is the Klingon ship for Next Generation. It's really the only one made for the Next Generation specifically. And they did a very good job, along with the Romulan Warbird, and even the Ferengi Marauder. Heck, I even really like the Cardassian Galore. So, because they had to make real models and they were still on a TV budget, most of the time, unless it was just a throwaway model they needed for a ship of the week, when they were making a model for a primary race, I think they put a lot of good art design into them. Alrighty. Well, we've got one more battle cruiser to go. So check in for the next part whenever I publish that. In the meanwhile, if you could like, share, subscribe. And as always, feel free to comment below. This is Misha. And until next time, Kapla.